UCF fans, this is Brian Smith bringing you another edition of the Daily Night, and I'm also the publisher of Inside the Knights on Fan Nation, powered by Sports Illustrated. Today's episode is going to be about recruiting, comparing where the Knights are right now in terms of how they recruit, not necessarily the 2022 recruiting class they're working on, but how they recruit as it relates to what they will be 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now. What type of program will they be? How do they build? It's part of what I wrote about today on the site and a little bit of the last few days, actually. Probably more Thursday's action. But overall, it's something that is just really needing to be explained because it's a deep, deep subject. Football recruiting has changed forever with the transfer portal. I've written about this before as well during the summer. But now we're starting to see the fruits of the labor. It's one thing to sign. It is another to see productivity. Bryson Armstrong, for instance, he leads the Knights in tackles, 40 to be exact. He had 22 against Navy. Came out of the transfer portal. How you evaluate, how you do your business is predicated on recruiting. Every program is the same in that. From Alabama all the way down to Kennesaw State, where Bryson Armstrong came from, everybody must evaluate and do their own homework. UCF has done tremendous, and I've got a chart up here with all the recruiting rankings and whatnot in front of me. But how do they recruit now, and what will they get to in a few years? It's going to be a stark difference, and I'm going to go through that step by step right here. It's going to be two primary categories here, and that's the 2022 class, and then I'm going to use a projection based on my own subjectivity and looking at what they've done so far and some of the inside knowledge I have of what's going on around the program over in Orlando. Now, this is still subjective, I will give you that, but UCF's trend on how they recruit is going to be completely different. To give an example, UCF in East Carolina, the article I put up on Thursday, is pretty much the same. They find and develop players that other programs, quite frankly, did not necessarily want, and or they just found somebody else to commit earlier, whatever it may be. Maybe it was a kid that was a late bloomer in terms of how big he got, etc. Kalia Davis is a great example. He was, give or take, 240 pounds when he walked out the door of high school. He's over 300 pounds now playing tackle on the defensive side of the ball for the Knights. Great example of development. UCF did a tremendous job, prior staff first and now the current staff, of helping Kalia Davis improve, not just looking at numbers and whatnot aside. Not a lot of teams knew about him. He didn't have Power 5 offers coming out of West Florida Tech and Pensacola. He wasn't. UCF found that guy. Same thing with Keaton Mitchell and East Carolina. That's a kid I've talked about every single day this week, and I will continue to do so. He will arguably be the best player on the field Saturday when UCF plays East Carolina. Nobody really wanted him. He had an offer from Nebraska and West Virginia, although I'm not sure either was committable as this process went on. I didn't follow his recruitment, but offered and committable are two different animals all to themselves. That's a podcast for another day. But with that being stated, here's the main thing you need to understand. UCF has built to where they are now, finding players with speed, both sides of the football, both sides, and then moving around to different positions. Kalia being a great example. You need speed on defense. If you can find it a defensive tackle, God bless you. They've also found kids that other teams just didn't really know about. Gabriel Davis, another kid I wrote about on Thursday. He's playing for the Buffalo Bills. This just in, the Bills are really freaking good. And he's on that roster making plays. That's one heck of a football player. Came out of Seminole High School, just north of Orlando. No Power 5s. UCF liked his 6'3", 205-pound frame and said, come on down. No problem with that. That's fine. And he was a 3-and-out. Diamond in the rough that's a 3-and-out guy in college. Didn't even play a down of his senior year. The rarest of the rare. Usually it takes a year or two for those guys to hit the ground running. But he did pretty good as a freshman, and then as a sophomore and as a junior, he was his lights out. He was one of those guys that could have played for any team in the country. That being stated, he's still the exception, not the rule. You win with 4 and 5 stars at the ultimate level. That's just reality. UCF is not there yet. Hint. What are they doing right now? If you look at quarterback, you got Keene and just the roster in general. A lot of guys that are a little smaller, but they're accurate and they're mobile. It's a great way to kind of break into it. If UCF continues on this path, you can win a lot of games. Can you win a national title? I'm not so sure. It's debatable. To do it, you would need, and there's no way around this, a lot more talent on defense to start, and I mean a lot more. And you would also need more depth on offense. Their frontline starters at the skill spots are flat out really good and play for anybody. UCF, skill spot-wise, I will, not kidding, like Arkansas or any of the mid-level SEC teams, no problem. Ole Miss, Alabama, Georgia, their skill position players, maybe, maybe not, because they've got more depth. Starters, pretty close, but UCF doesn't have a dominant outside receiver that's big. Brandon gets a lot of one-on-ones because of the other guys out there. I don't know if he would start at some of the others. I don't know, but he's pretty darn good. You put him out there with Ryan O'Keefe and some of the other guys like Amari, Caden, and, of course, Jalen when he's healthy, and then everybody works together, and it's tremendous. That's what UCF has done. They pieced it together. But the O-line needs to have more depth. The starters are going to have a lot of turnover after this year. Teams that win at the ultimate high level have guys go out every year, 2 and 3 years into the program. You can tell, hey, this guy's not going to be here for his senior year. Sometime by the end of their freshman year. It just, it is what it is. UCF is nowhere near that, and to get there, they've got to recruit at a higher level. Going into the Big 12 is something we've talked about a gazillion times, and it's the number one thing. It's the elephant in the room. It changes your recruiting, but that's not what this podcast is about. This podcast is about how this staff recruits, and I've been digging into that more than the exact player. And what I mean by that is UCF is recruiting kids that Alabama offers, that Miami offers, that Notre Dame offers, that South Carolina offers, ACC, SEC, Notre Dame private school, Ohio State. They're going toe-to-toe. In the recruiting comparison I did on Thursday, I broke it down between the two schools, and I have that chart up in front of me now. UCF has not had a recruiting class from 217 through 221 ranked by 247 Sports higher than number 55. That's not very good. It's just not. It's pretty bad. But they still found ways to win at the American Athletic Conference level. It's not Power 5, and believe me, there is a stark difference. But with that, they've still done way better with coaching, development, and finding guys, again, speed being the key, regardless of position. And they're starting to get a few guys that are above that in the class of 22. Nakai Martinez, went to saw him the other day, and some of the other kids at Apopka. They got a lot of players. They're all the kids they're recruiting at Sanford Seminole, where Gabriel Davis is from, ironically. Lakeland, Keanis Thompson, the defensive end, he will play right away at UCF, guarantee it. And some of the other kids that they're bringing in on offense too, they have some athletes that are not your typical number 55 to number 75 class ranking. They're top 25 kids in the country. They could have played for any program that ranks in the top 25. I'd say they have a half dozen of those kids right now and a few kids that are more traditional UCF. This is the stepping stone class for UCF. Next year, and Gus Malzahn and his staff have talked about that on numerous occasions, whether it's just in general conversation with media or at a podium and saying, hey, this is what's up, man. This is who we're recruiting, but 23, 24, 20. Gus Malzahn in particular talked about that at one press conference. But when you have a year plus to do it, and I wanted to wait before I had this podcast again, you have to see. And the result, for whatever reason, it's just personality for some kids, whatever, has been really good with some of the higher end kids that are underclassmen. Not going to go into names and all that. They have to earn it. It's a long way for their decisions. Well, I don't think UCF's going to get a bunch of kids from out of state that are elite in the 22 class. I expect that to start to expand. The Florida kids still always get more than, because it's easier. It's closer to home. I get it, and I'm sure everybody out there does too. A heck of a lot easier to pick UCF if you live in Sanford, or if you live in Kissimmee or Lakeland or Tampa or Cocoa or anything like that, any of those places you grew up or now live, of course it's easier. But Atlanta, that's the number one city they have to hit. It's the best city in the South outside of Miami for football recruiting. They've got to do a better job of getting some of the out-of-state kids. It's a little iffy right now. They've gotten some Southern Georgia kids, which is interesting. Got to do a better job in Atlanta than Montgomery, Mobile, Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, etc. There are a lot of kids they're in on in 23 and 24 that most people that follow recruiting will be like, nah, they're not going to get that kid. They ain't got a chance. It's UCF. I'm telling you right now, that's going to change. It's going to change. That's going to wrap it up for segment one, but I want you to think about something before we go to break and go into segment two. What's the difference between UCF and each recruiting class with another two kids just from a high school perspective, forget the transfer portal, that are a national top 250 to top 350 kid? Just think about that for a second. Now, to start segment two, if you can bring in two of those kids, what can you do at defensive line, at corner? Those are the two positions every school is always trying to recruit, UCF included, to make a difference, because beyond quarterback, those are the two positions that are by far the most marquee. Need to rotate guys. It's hard. And there aren't a ton of them anyway. It is what it is. You just got to make it work. If you add two more guys over a 4-year period, so 8 in total, you can go from like the number 100 defense to the number 20 real fast. That's where UCF is starting to see trends. I'm starting to hear some things. Like, just as an example, one of my friends is a coach up in Georgia, the high school level. There's a kid named Danzis Miller who's a really good football player. He can fly. He can fly. He's a kid UCF is hard after. He's going to visit UCF in the month of October, barring something changing. It looks like it's going to be the Knights or the NC State Wolfpack. That's what I've heard. Now, with high school recruits, that can change. He doesn't like doing interviews and all that, but still, Danzis is a kid I've seen play multiple times. He can flat out go. He can play a free safety. He can play corner. Multiple roles in a secondary with speed. Sign me up. Why he's not more heavily recruited? I was joking around with my buddy, and we're like, we don't get it. Okay. They have one of the best coaching staffs in the Atlanta area at Creekside, and he's been coached up flat out. He will play early, whether it's UCF, NC State, wherever. You add a couple guys like that to your roster, and it changes things. 3 years ago, that kid probably would not have even sniffed the idea of coming to UCF. It's just true. You had the Big 12, obviously, and you had a coaching staff, Gus Malzahn, Travis Williams, David Gibbs, etc., that have familiarity with recruiting the South. And you find yourself in a situation where you can start getting kids that Power 5 programs are used to getting. You're not there yet. You're not a Power 5 program till you are officially in it. UCF is 23. It's 21. We got 2 years. But if you start stockpiling now, when you walk into the Big 12, it's a heck of a lot easier. Otherwise, you're going to get stomped. You have to improve your defense recruiting exponentially. Depth, depth, depth. I could say it 1,000 times. It wouldn't be enough. You need a plethora of players on defense that can flat out fly if you're going to play in the Big 12, because everybody can throw the football and they're going to score. That's why guys like Danzis Miller are important. For whatever the reason, UCF is starting to get there. I think it's personally based on the personalities of the UCF coaching staff. They've done a great job. The administrative staff in the back office, great job. You're getting kids on campus. They're getting kids to take visits that, quite frankly, aren't very close. It's on their own dime, some of these unofficials. Difference between official and unofficial. Look it up. Very important. One's paid for, one's not. Some of these kids don't come from a lot of money. And they're finding ways to get them down. October is kind of the warm-up for recruiting to finish. November is full bore. And then signing day will be the 15th of December. Roughly 80% of the kids for the class of 2022 will put pen to paper on the 15th. Some will wait till January to kind of take more visits and sign the first Wednesday of February. That's true. Primarily, though, it will be December. UCF is in a position where there's really no reason to think that their recruiting class, like again, in 2017, they were ranked 55th. It's going to be better than that with an asterisk. As noted, the Knights take players from the portal. The NCAA just announced a rule, and I did a podcast about this and some other things related somewhat recently. For every player up to 7 that you lose to transfer, like Eric Gilliard just transferred out of UCF. He's in the portal, if you will. He's still there, but he's in the portal. For everyone up to 7, you can sign an additional player. Traditionally speaking, you have 25 players you can sign in a class. Hypothetical, if UCF lost 7 guys, just to use the math, they could sign 32. That changes how many high school kids you took. I knew flat out, no ifs, no ands, or buts. UCF was planning to take a very small class because they were going to hit the portal again. It's understandable. They've done good. Bryson Armstrong, have you seen him lately? Yeah, he's really good. There's reasons you do that. You get instant impact. I get it. With that, they're going to change some things. I'll be curious to see who they go after. But Miller, just being an example up in Atlanta, there's going to be some other kids like that. Look for the Knights to take more speed, more defensive guys, and they have more clout now. If they've just, for whatever reason you want to use, and mine is, it's based on the UCF coaching staff. Kids like them. They're getting some feedback that they like. They're bringing in kids. They've got a chance. UCF is going to be a team that is going to move up the recruiting rankings. Where they're ranked by 24/7 and rivals and all that, I don't care because the portal is going to make it weird. Some schools really don't use it. They'll take 2, 3 kids. UCF took like 12 last year, I believe, off the top of my head. That's a big, big difference. If you cannot find 5 to 8 kids out of the portal, then you can still go to high school route. Plus, there's a junior college player, etc. I know they're looking at a few junior college offensive linemen, just as an example. They have 3 offensive linemen committed right now. But the JUCO route, especially O-line, makes sense because it's such a long transition from high school to college for most players, from high school to college to play O-line. It's all about technique. Offensive linemen at the college level are more built than recruited. There's some exceptions, but by and large, they are built. Junior college kid, a little more foundation, stronger, bigger. It's just part of it. The maturation process is there. Now, the final part to this, to wrap it up, we don't know who in the world is going to transfer out. Gilliard being one obvious exception. He's already made his announcement. There's some other kids. But if they get up to like 6 kids or whatever, they could still go the high school route depending on which high school kid it is. If there's a kid at the end of the year that wants to flip, for instance, from Florida to UCF, and don't laugh, those kind of things are different now. Kids want to play. It's the number one thing. I don't care about the conference as much. I want to play. I'm trying to sell myself, get to the NFL. That's how it works. Just because it says Alabama next to the check mark on an offer on whatever database you look at really doesn't mean that much anymore. Notre Dame, USC, Texas, Florida State, North Carolina, Boston College, doesn't matter. Ohio State, Kentucky, doesn't matter. UCF can recruit with anybody now. It's been proven. They've gotten 3 kids off the top of my head that had offers from numerous SEC, ACC schools. Can they do that consistently? Yes. They're getting more exposure. The Big 12 is going to help, etc. Can they find a few more high school kids? That's just personal curiosity. That's what I want to know. And that's what I'm going to leave on. If anybody has any questions about football recruiting with UCF, look at the end of this class. Please do that because it's going to be pretty good with the help of the transfer portal. This is Brian Smith wrapping up. Check it out at Inside the Knights on Fan Nation, powered by Sports Illustrated. Across the bottom of the screen there is the Twitter handle to check out. All the articles will be up. But everybody have a safe weekend. I'll have a game prediction and whatnot on Friday. And I also have some opportunities to bring up a few interesting things on Saturday's edition that are coming up too, as East Carolina visits UCF.